Well, hello there. It is Dr. Siobhan here, and I am so excited for this live stream. I am going to be talking about 5 reasons why your husband has changed, right? Because we all want to know. Inevitably, every marriage hits some bumps in the roads, and all of a sudden you look at this person and you're like, what happened to the person that I married? What happened to my husband? What happened to this person who was so loving and caring and attentive and romantic? Like, where did he go? Where did that person go? What has happened to cause us to be in sort of this cool or cold situation towards each other? So that is a question that I hear a lot. That is a situation that happens to a lot of marriages. Over time, things happen, and all of a sudden you wake up one morning and you're looking at your spouse and you're just sort of like, what happened? Like, what happened to us? What happened to the way that we used to be? And so I wanted to come on tonight to talk to the woman, you, who's sitting there wondering, like, what happened to my husband? Like, why has he changed? Why is he just not that into me anymore? And I wanted to share 5 reasons for why that is. And I have some notes, so you're going to notice me just checking down on my notes here to make sure that I don't miss anything that I want to say. Now, inevitably when this happens, right? Inevitably when you look at your spouse and you feel like they've changed and that some of the things they used to do, they don't do anymore. Some of the ways they used to be around you, they're not that way anymore. You look at them and you sort of want to judge them for it, right? It's sort of like, well, why aren't you doing what you used to do? Or why aren't you being the way that you used to be? Why is this not the way it was before? And you want to sort of like, you know, smack them a little bit and just whip them back to shape. Like, why aren't you paying attention to me? Why aren't you showering me with this love and attention? Why aren't you so understanding and supportive as you were before? Why are we having all of these communication issues? These are many, many of the questions that I get asked all the time. Questions I've asked even myself in my own marriage. And, you know, the reality is a lot of times we look at our husbands and want him to be different or want him to be the way that he was before. But we haven't yet taken the time to really assess within ourselves, like, what is it maybe that I'm doing that's creating this response in him, right? We want to quickly blame him and point out the things that he should be doing differently, how he should be thinking differently, behaving differently, speaking differently, you name it. We have a list of things that we wish our husbands were doing differently. And it's so easy to keep the focus on him and what he should be doing or what he should not be doing. And by doing that, a lot of times we don't give ourselves the opportunity to self-reflect. We don't give ourselves the opportunity to maybe look at the ways that we've contributed to, you know, a less than desirable situation in our marriage at a particular point in time. And so I'll share that even for myself, that was something that I had to do. You know, when my husband and I got married, you know, I would have described him as the type of person who never shied away from difficult conversations. This was a man where if we had an issue, he was like open-minded, ready to have the conversation, welcoming my opinion, my thoughts, and he was just like so receptive to having difficult conversations about any topic at all. For myself, hi Jennifer, it's so good to see you here. For myself, I am the conflict avoider. I like to keep the peace, you know, I like to just, you know, not really address issues all the time. And so when we first got together, you know, I was always nervous to like approach him with certain conversations because I didn't want to talk about it. But he made it such a comfortable environment for me that eventually over time, I got really comfortable talking about difficult things and sharing my opinion and giving my perspective and, you know, debating with him a little bit. And what I wasn't realizing that was happening was that over time, as I was getting more vocal, as I was asserting my thoughts and opinions, it was shutting him down. And it wasn't intentional on my part, but over time I realized, and there were certain junctures where, you know, there were certain conversations that I wanted to have, and his response to me was different. You know, he wasn't as welcoming and open and as engaging in the conversation. It was almost like he was a little bit guarded and that he didn't want to have certain conversations with me anymore. And I had to really take a look in the mirror. I had to really look at myself and see, okay, what is it that maybe I have done along the way that's caused him to now not want to have these types of conversations with me? And I realized, I am defensive. I can be controlling, all of these things that I had to look within myself to realize that I was doing that ultimately led to him having a different approach to me in certain types of conversations. And so that required was that then I sort of try to make up, and clean up the trail of mess that I had made along the way. And so that required being much more intentional about how I showed up to certain conversations, being more open-minded, being more sensitive to how I communicated with him, how I shared my thoughts, how I received his opinions. And so that is something, a skill that I continue to work on, continue to develop, as do we all, right? And I really help a lot of women to get to that place as well. And so I'm happy to report that, I shined that spotlight on myself. I looked in the mirror and I was really aware of how I was contributing to the experience and the sort of shift in our relationship that was happening. Hey, Ken, it's good to see you here too. So I wanted to just come on and talk about this from that lens, right? And so this may not be the live stream that you're like, yeah, because what I'm going to ask you to do is to look within yourself. I'm going to ask you to reflect, and I'm going to give you 5 different reasons why your husband may have changed, like why the way he's responding and interacting with you now is different than it was before. And all of these reasons are reasons that I want you to look within yourself to find examples where maybe you need to sort of raise your hand and say, yeah, I did that, right? Because so much of the work that I do in helping create happier and more loving marriages doesn't require that the husband change at all. It's actually the opposite, that I believe the quickest path to your own personal happiness, the quickest route to seeing the improvements in your marriage that you want is by taking a good look in the mirror. And so that's actually what this live stream is about. It is about taking responsibility. I lead a group here on Facebook called Happily Married Woman, and there are many principles that I believe contribute to being happily married. One of those is being able to take responsibility, take full responsibility for your actions, your reactions, your behaviors within the context of your marriage. And that's what this live stream is about. So I'm probably not going to get a lot of friends, but I'm going to tell the truth, because sometimes we need to hear the truth. I need to hear the truth. So I want you to know that just as much as I'm sharing this information with you, I'm speaking to myself, and I'm going to take note and adjust myself accordingly, okay? So one reason, and in no particular order, but what I want you to do is just listen and see, like, do you need to raise your hand? Are you a little bit guilty of this as you think about the shift you may be experiencing or seeing in your husband right now? So number 1 is disrespect, right? So your husband may have changed in your mind because somewhere along the way you disrespected him. It may not have been intentional. It may not have been deliberate. It may not even have been something that you were consciously aware of. But we know, right, there's books on this. There's this book called Love and Respect, very familiar with it, talks about how important being respected is to a man. And for women, sometimes that's hard for us to fully understand because we want to be loved. That's what the book was about, how women, our greatest desire is to be loved, how men, their greatest desire is to be respected. And so when it comes to respect and violations of respect that we may need to raise our hand and take responsibility for, those are the times where maybe you didn't let your husband lead, or you didn't trust his judgment, or you challenged him in a way, or maybe there was some bruise to his ego. Again, not to say that it was intentional, not to even say that maybe you were fully aware of what was happening, but I want you to just search your mind and to try to identify instances in your own relationship where maybe the level of respect that he desired, or maybe the level of respect that you used to provide for him, was diminished in some way, shape, or form. Okay, hi Janine, it's so good to see you. Hi Nakia and Lena, great to have you guys on. And so that's just what I want you to think about. Like, when were the times in your relationship where maybe you did disrespect him, right? Where maybe something you said was a little off-putting and offended him in some way, shape, or form, okay? That male ego is super, super fragile. I know a lot of times we think men don't get as emotional. They do. They won't express it to us the way that we will to them, but they feel it just the same, which leads me to number two, the second reason why you may notice that your husband has changed, that there seems to be a shift, and that is neglect. I got to raise my hand for this one. I really got to raise my hand for this one. And I think a lot of times the key trigger in this is when you have children, right? If you didn't already have children in the relationship and you become a mother, it does something to us, ladies, right? I know I have a 1 and a 3-year-old, and I feel like the person I was before children and the person I am after children is completely different. And we pour ourselves into our children. They become everything to us. Not that they shouldn't, right? Not that they shouldn't. But what we don't often realize is the way that we put our husbands on the back burner. And that's not to say that you need to stretch yourself beyond capacity to try to meet everyone's needs. But a lot of times when our husbands withdraw from us, or when we notice this shift and it feels like he's changed, it's because maybe we haven't been giving him the attention that he really craves for us. And I know my husband and I have had many conversations about this. And I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me that you wanted more time? He's like, I feel guilty, right? Who am I to be like, hey, Siobhan, let's spend time together when you're like not getting enough sleep, the kids are demanding, you're like this way and that way. Like the last thing I want to do is be a source of additional stress and burden to you. And so he may be feeling neglected and never mention that to you. And again, you may not even be aware of the way you're neglecting him, or you may give yourself permission to put him on the back burner because the kids need you right now, or your job needs you right now, or whatever other endeavor you are pursuing at the moment needs you more than him, right? And so essentially this just means something else has a priority to you. And there are times and seasons where that's okay, or where that will happen. I think the key is to not allow it to persist for too long, and to recognize and to take responsibility, again, because that's what we're doing now, to take responsibility for maybe your part in the change that you now see in him, not just putting all the blame on him, but being woman enough and empowered enough to say, you know what, you're right. Like, I didn't put you first, and now you're not putting me first, and I notice it, so let's fix it. Okay, so that was number two. Number three is he's hurt. Now, I know you're thinking, like, he's hurt? Really? Like, he's so mean to me. He's so rude. Like, how could he be hurt? And we mask hurt in a lot of different ways, right? Again, as I said before, men are not going to say, like, you hurt my feelings, right? That's what we say as women. But he's going to show that in other ways. And that, again, if you're sensing some withdrawal, or you're sensing that he's just not, taking the initiative and putting forth the effort that you'd like to see, there's probably some hurt underneath that. Maybe it was something you said, maybe it was something you did, maybe it was just a way that you made him feel. Maybe he didn't feel important, maybe he didn't feel appreciated, maybe he didn't feel valued in some way, shape, or form. And so again, just search your mind to think of examples or times where you may have to take responsibility and admit that, you know what, yeah, I probably did hurt you and I wasn't even thinking that way. And then use those magical words of, I'm sorry, please forgive me, right? Because a lot of times that's all people need to heal the hurt, is just an acknowledgement. We know that as women. We don't often think of that same principle applying to our husbands, but it definitely does. The way you feel about your kids is the way I feel about my husband. Yeah, Jennifer, can you imagine me right now, my business and my kids? I'm like tunnel vision, and I have to catch myself a lot to make sure that I don't neglect my husband. So yeah, that's so, so true. Hi, Mia. Great to see you here too. So number four, the fourth reason, and again, these are in no particular order, but the number four reason, or the fourth reason why your husband may have changed, why you're experiencing this shift, is because you blamed him for something, right? Nobody likes to be blamed. our egos protect us from being blamed. And, you know, there may have been a time where maybe something went wrong and you pointed the finger at him and he felt, you know, diminished, right? Men never want to feel like we're trying to be their mothers. And so there are times where maybe we're a little bit controlling, or maybe we're a little bit judgmental or critical, and we point that finger at him instead of lovingly guiding him. I put a post on Instagram today about that, that our role is not to condemn and to, you know, make our husbands feel bad about their mistakes, but it's just to lovingly guide them. Like, we're in this together. When he wins, you win. When he loses, you loses. But a lot of times we get into this position of wanting to be right, right? It feels good to be right sometimes. And so we want to be right and we blame him. And then when he feels blame, we don't feel safe to him. And, you know, as wives, our role is to be a safe place for our husbands. There's an affirmation that I wrote in my book, Voices in Your Ear, that talks about that talks about, you know, he should feel at home with you. And so if he doesn't, right, and you're not feeling the love from him the way you want, then you have to just search yourself and see, like, have I been home for him? Have I been a safe place for him? Or have I blamed him and judged him and criticized him in some way, right? So that was number 4. I'm going to do number 5, but I know we've just had some people join us, so I'll just quickly do a recap in that, you know, if you've experienced this shift in your husband, it feels like he's more distant or not into you the way that you want. It really requires that you take a look in the mirror and that you begin to take responsibility for some of the things you may have done. And we're just going through the list of things that you probably, you, me, all of us need to do to sort of just search our minds and see, like, have I been guilty of that? Number 1 that I mentioned was disrespect. Number 2 was neglect. Number 3 was hurt. Number 4 was blamed. And then number 5 is rejected. Nobody likes rejection. Nobody likes rejection. Oh, thank you. Thank you about my hair, Shanetta. I just got my hair did tonight. Thank you. My lovely hairdresser is amazing, Gigi. I'll give her a shout out. Déjeuner Jean-Francois. She is very, very Haitian and very, very magical in my head. Anyways, I'm digressing. Excuse me for that sidestep, but thanks for the comment, Shanetta. Anyways, so rejection, right? Nobody likes rejection. And I think as women, sometimes we're not as conscious of the ways that we reject our husband, right? And I think one of the things that first comes out for us as we think about this is probably in the area of intimacy, of sexual intimacy, that maybe there are times when he is making advances to us and we're like, no, boo, like, I am too tired, later for that, I'll catch you next time, right? How many of us have been guilty of that? I know that I have. And again, in this book, Love and Respect, they also talk about how the components of what respect looks like to a male include that sexual intimacy, that intimacy for your husband is so important, that it's not really just about the physical aspect of it, but that is the way that he has given himself permission to express himself to you. And so anytime that you reject him or anytime that we reject them, it's really damaging. And I don't think we're super conscious of that. And there's another researcher that talks a lot about the principles for successful marriages. It's this guy, Dr. John Gottman. And one of the things he mentions is that one of the most damaging insults to a marriage is when someone reaches out and it either goes unnoticed by the other person or it's rejected. And, you know, I just want you to think about the times where maybe your husband reached out to you, maybe in an emotional way, right? A lot of times, you know, we may hear a husband say, like, you don't spend enough time, or I'm not important. And we see that as complaining rather than seeing that as him articulating a need, him reaching out to us. And so we may brush it off because we're not really paying attention, but he takes that as rejection. And you know how it goes, right? We've all experienced rejection. When you're rejected, you sort of shrink back. You don't want to put yourself out there. You don't want to be vulnerable anymore. And so you create a little bit of distance. And so if you're experiencing that, maybe that may be something that you'll just want to look within yourself to see, are there times when I have rejected my husband? unintentionally, or I didn't understand what it was he was actually meaning, right? You heard the words, you didn't understand the meaning. And I talk about this concept of listening with your heart, of being able to really tune into the emotions of your husband beyond the words that he's saying. So there you have it, 5 reasons why your husband may have changed, right? You disrespected him in some way. Again, maybe not even on purpose. You neglected him in some way. Something else was more important and a bigger priority to you. You hurt him. Something you said, something you did. Maybe he didn't feel important or valued. You blamed him because you criticized, you judged, you tried to control, right? Or maybe you rejected him. Now, listen, I don't want to just leave you with this, making you feel all sad and bad, right? Because I'm about empowering us as women in our marriages. And, these 5 things are common mistakes that we all make, right? From time to time. Like, none of us is perfect. We are all growing and evolving and trying to figure this marriage thing out as best we can. And so, I often like to say when I'm working with my one-on-one clients, I'm like, you don't have to get it perfect all the time. You just got to clean it up when you mess it up, right? It's like that song. I have toddlers, so I always think about clean up, everybody, everywhere. Clean up, everybody, do your share. I will not be on any singing shows, don't you worry, because I know I can't sing. But I love that song because, it's just like, just clean it up. Like, it doesn't have to be a big deal that you messed up. Clean it up and clean it up quickly. Like, how quickly can you recover when some of these things happen, right? Because it's when it's perpetual and it's continual without any acknowledgement, without any trying to clean it up, that's when you see the damage done. That's when you have all of this distance where you feel like roommates in your marriage rather than soulmates, right? And so if you have listened to this live stream and you're like, yeah, I probably could use some help in correcting some of those things, I want to invite you to a training that I'm giving on Thursday, which is August the 17th. And it's a free training, completely free. It's called 5 Marriage Mistakes That Are Keeping You Stuck, and what to do so you can finally move forward. Because it's one thing to know what you're doing wrong, and a lot of times we already know what we're doing wrong, but it's like, what do you do about it? How do you move yourself forward? How do you clean it up? So if that sounds like something you would be interested in doing, I would love to have you on that call. So it's a teleseminar. I'm not doing it as a live stream. It will be a private call for women who are really, serious about learning the things that they need to learn to avoid these mistakes, right? And so the call is completely free. It is, again, Thursday, August the 17th at 9:30 p.m. It's about an hour long. You'll have the chance to ask questions. We can interact and actually talk to each other, or you can just be on the line and listen and not say a word. That's fine too. It is free, but you do have to register. So with this post, there is a link to register. You can do that right on my website at berelatable.com/call. Try to make it easy for you. And I hope to have you on the line this Thursday. So I'm just going to stick around. I know we've got some people watching live. If you have any questions for what I've just talked about here or any comments, please feel free to post them and I will respond to any questions that you have. I'll make sure that I don't miss any comments that have been here. Hi, Cynthia. So good to see you here. So I was just talking really quickly, recapping 5 reasons why your husband might have changed. Disrespect, neglect, hurt, blamed, or rejected. It's tough, right? It's tough. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for that. So if there aren't any questions right now, I'm going to say goodnight. I'll say so long, right? Because you're going to join me on Thursday for this call. It's going to be amazing. And if you're watching this on the replay, hi. Just the same, put your comments in there now. I will check back on this video to see if there are any additional comments or questions. If you have troubles with the link and you want to be on the call, let me know. I will definitely make sure you get your spot in that conversation. 5 marriage mistakes that are keeping you stuck. and more importantly, what to do so that you can finally move forward. So thank you all for tuning in. I will be back with you sometime very, very soon. So make sure you like this page, you have your notifications on, because Facebook is funny sometimes, and they don't like to show everything in your newsfeed that you probably want to see. And for sure, you want to see what I got to share, right? For sure you do. I hope you do, because I like sharing it. All right, have a great, great night, and I'll be back with you sometime soon. Bye-bye.